And I thought, do you know what? When he wins this, I'm just going to walk straight off.
He'll deny it because he did. I said, I turned around and said, you're tutting behind me as I'm throwing. And he went, no, I'm not. I said, yes, you are.
Peter Manley served as best man at Wayne Mardle's wedding before Mardle put the word cheat next to his name in print. Phil Taylor was invited to Manley's own wedding in Las Vegas and never bothered turning up. Adrian Lewis once walked off the stage mid-match during a World Championship quarter-final because of what Manley was whispering behind his back. These are 7 players Peter Manley clashed with hard enough that the hatred spilled into books, podcasts, post-match interviews, and live television, and the man at number 1 is the same man who beat him in 3 world finals without losing more than 2 sets in any of them. Some background first. Manley earned the One Dart nickname at the 1995 Unipart European Masters, when commentator Tony Green coined the phrase after he kept closing winning doubles with the first dart of a visit. 3 PDC World Championship finals followed across his career, and all 3 ended in losses to the same opponent. The result was darts' most theatrical pantomime villain, a player who cupped his ears at the booze, danced to Tony Christie's Is This the Way to Amarillo, and weaponized crowd hatred to put opponents off their game. Along that road he picked up some genuine enemies. Counting down to the rivalry that defined everything, these are the 7 who mattered most. Roland Scholten, the Dutchman known as the Tripod, sits in reference sources as one of Manley's notable on-stage spats, with the friction reportedly centered on match etiquette and pace of play. Their clearest documented meeting on a major stage came in February 2007, when Manley beat Scholten in group play at the Masters of Darts in Hengelo in the Netherlands, and the footage of that match still exists today. Tension between them never escalated into the kind of headline incident that defined some of Manley's other rivalries, but Scholten earns his place here because Manley's gamesmanship reputation followed him across borders. Walking into Dutch tournaments in front of Dutch crowds and facing Dutch opponents, the man they called One Dart always carried an edge, and Scholten was one of the players who felt it most. Dennis Smith earns his spot through a single moment at the 2006 PDC World Championship in a 3rd round match at the Circus Tavern in Purfleet. The Press Association match report carried by Irish Examiner and RTA documents what happened, with Manley deliberately keeping Smith waiting on stage while he went off to change shirts mid-match. That shirt mattered because it was Manley's lucky pink flamingo top, the same one he would wear in the quarter-final that followed against Adrian Lewis. Textbook gamesmanship is the polite description, and the move was designed to break an opponent's rhythm while reminding everyone watching exactly who was running the show. Smith never publicly addressed it afterwards, but the shirt change stunt became one of several flashpoints that made Manley the most talked about player of that tournament, right through to the final, where he ended up losing 0-7 to Phil Taylor. Wayne Mardle's rivalry with Manley carries the sharpest twist on this list because Peter Manley served as best man at Wayne Mardle's wedding. Closeness between them ran deep enough that Mardle was actually the one who suggested Manley should dance to Amarillo when the walk-on music changed in 2005. Everything shifted in March 2006 when Vision Sports Publishing released Mardle's autobiography, Hawaii 501 Life as a Darts Pro, co-written with Ian Spragg and featuring a foreword by Phil Taylor. Inside that book, Mardle reportedly accused Manley of being a cheat, and the relationship between them never quite recovered. By October 2017, with Mardle now established in commentary work for Sky Sports, Manley appeared on the Sky Sports Darts Show podcast, specifically to respond to ongoing criticism from his former best man, addressing what was described as the dark arts of darts, the Darts Regulation Authority, and player well-being. Sparring between them has continued into the current era. November 20-25 brought the latest dig when Mardle, advising Luke Littler on his confrontational style, name-checked Manley alongside Paul Nicholson and Gerwyn Price, with his exact words being, quote, "Peter Manley tried it back in the day, didn't work. Paul Nicholson tried it back in the day, didn't work. Gerwyn Price tried it, doesn't like it. They've all become ingratiators to the crowd in that regard. They've all changed tack," end quote. 2 decades after the wedding, Mardle is still putting his former best man on the wrong side of the darts history ledger. Colin Lloyd's friction with Manley traces back to the 2002 PDC World Championship semi-final at the Circus Tavern, where Manley won the match 6-4 and went through to face Phil Taylor in the final. Both players went on the record afterwards. Manley publicly complained about Lloyd's equipment and pace, saying he was annoyed by how easily the flights kept coming off Lloyd's darts and feeling the Englishman had slowed the match deliberately. Lloyd hit straight back, telling reporters the warm arena had reduced his hand grip and denying that he employed any kind of gamesmanship to slow his opponent down. Their tension returned in the 2005 Premier League, where Lloyd beat Manley 8-4 in Week 2 with a 92.45 average, and then again at their Premier League semi-final at the GMEX in Manchester later that year. Sky Sports promoted that rematch with a Sid Waddle voiceover titled "Jaws is Angry in Manchester," referencing Lloyd's nickname and his attitude toward facing his old rival. On-stage friction between them never fully exploded, and what stands out today is how the relationship eventually healed. Lloyd now hosts the Talkball podcast on Talk Sport, with Manley as a regular guest, and it was on that podcast in 2024 that Manley first publicly told the story of inviting Phil Taylor to his Las Vegas wedding. The man Manley once accused of slowing down a World Championship semi-final is now the man handing him the microphone. Vincent van der Voort represents the post-retirement entry on this list, and it proves Manley's ability to provoke the darts establishment never disappeared after he stopped playing competitively. Late May 2025 produced the Flashpoint. As chairman of the Professional Darts Players Association, Manley sat down for an interview with Online Darts that was later summarized by dartsnews.com on May 28, 2025, under the headline "President of PDPA slammed online after bizarre interview," with one outlet putting it that he came across like he couldn't care less about the players. Inside that interview, Manley defended the modern prize money structure, his exact words being, quote, "The golden ticket really starts, that you can now earn £1 million for being a world champion and no one can stop you," end quote. On first round losers prize money at £1,250, his defense ran, quote, "Barry's words from the beginning were that you've always got to win a game. You cannot just turn up and earn money," end quote. To the players themselves he addressed this, quote, "You've got so many chances to qualify now for the World Championship. If you don't, you've got to look at yourself and think," end quote. Complaints, he suggested, were coming from players who, quote, "probably aren't doing too well," end quote. Reaction came fast and personal. On the Dutch podcast Darts Draait Door in early June 2025, Vincent van der Voort attacked Manley directly with these words, quote, "One thing's clear after that interview, he's not there for the players. Their arrogance was dripping off him. The last thing a player wants to hear is someone banging on about how things used to be," end quote. Van der Voort went further still, telling listeners, quote, "I'm honestly glad I'm not a player anymore, because I'd have been absolutely furious if someone in his position said those things. It's disgustingly arrogant, and it simply doesn't work," end quote. Justin Pipe joined the pile-on around the same time via the Dutch outlet Darts News, and his English translation reads, "Peter Manley is only going through the motions at the PDPA. The man only lines his own pockets and does not care about players outside the top 10. For Manley, this represented a new kind of rivalry, not on the oche, but in the role of a player representative who had lost the very players he was supposed to be representing." Adrian Lewis brings us to December 30th, 2005, when the two met in the quarter-finals of the 2006 PDC World Championship at the Circus Tavern. Manley took the match 5-3 in a contest so bad-tempered that the legendary commentator Sid Waddle, calling it live for the broadcast, used the word cheating to describe Manley's conduct on the stage. The Contemporary Press Association report tells what happened next. When Lewis was 2 sets to 1 down, he hit a no-look 180, turning his back to face Manley as the final dart was still in the air, and Manley promptly took that set in response. In the next set, Lewis, just 20 years old at the time, and ranked world number 20, walked off the stage mid-match. After speaking with referee Ross Bray backstage, he returned to finish the game, only to lose when Manley closed it out with a 106 checkout at double top. What Lewis and Manley said afterwards has become some of the most direct post-match commentary in darts history. Lewis went on the record with this, quote, "I knew Peter would use tactics. He turned around and said I was tutting when I wasn't, and was saying things when I was throwing. I didn't actually hear what it was, but it was swearing. Phil told me to walk off if anything like that happened, but Peter beat me fair and square. I learned a lot, and I'll be back," end quote. Manley's response ran, quote, "I heard something when I was going for a double 4, which may or may not have been from Adrian. It was a tense match, it was all in the heat of the moment, and a bit of experience came through in the end. If I've done wrong, I've done wrong, and the governing body can put me in line. "I've no problem with Adrian, he's a lovely lad, and hopefully we can go and have a beer together now," end quote. Manley added that the heat on stage had played a role, while also pointing out that Lewis was being taught by Phil Taylor at the time, just as Manley himself had been taught by Taylor when he was beaten 7-0 in the 1999 final. July 2021 brought confirmation from Manley himself on the weekly Dartscast podcast that both players had been fined by the governing body. His exact words went, quote, "At the time, Sid Waddell actually called it cheating. He was basically doing things behind me and denied it, and I just got on with the game, but he wouldn't leave it. The next thing I know, he's walking off. We both got fined, but I ended up with £50,000 in the bank, so I was alright at the time," end quote. Looking at the historical record, the Lewis quarter-final remains the single most documented example of Peter Manley successfully running an opponent off the stage. Phil Taylor stands at number 1 because every other rivalry on this list orbits this one. Across roughly 25 meetings between 1999 and 2010, Taylor won 22 of them against Manley. 3 of those clashes happened at the PDC World Championship final, and Taylor won all 3 of them, 6-2 in 1999, 7-0 in 2002, and 7-0 again in 2006. The moment that defined this entire rivalry, however, came on January 5th, 2002 at the Circus Tavern in Purfleet. After Taylor sealed his 10th world title and 8th in a row with that 7-0 whitewash, Peter Manley turned and walked off the stage without shaking Phil Taylor's hand. He returned moments later to a chorus of boos and shook Taylor's hand for the cameras in what became the single most replayed image of his entire career. Manley has explained the moment many times in the years since. Speaking later with reference to Sky archive footage, he put it like this, quote, "I played Mr. Taylor in a world final in 1999 and he was doing some naughty things on the stage, some gamesmanship. Normally he runs up and down the stage and I wasn't going to stand there. I already prepared to walk off, but he turned around to shake my hand. I had already started going, so I just carried on," end quote. At the time, he also told reporters he simply needed to use the toilet. Taylor's post-match response landed on the diplomatic side, quote, "What you must remember is all the professionals are winners, and Peter deserved to be up here in the final. He was gutted, but he came back and shook my hand, and that is the end of it," end quote. Things were nowhere near finished though. Boos followed Manley at PDC venues for years afterwards. By 2005, Manley had changed his walk-on music from Chumbawamba's Tub Thumping to Tony Christie's Is This the Way to Amarillo, the switch happening after his wife Chrissy spotted the Peter Kay and Tony Christie cover version on television. That move converted ironic boos into pantomime cheers, and as Manley told Sky Sports in 2018, quote, "I knew I could use these boos and put other players off. I lived with it. I worked with it, and I thought it was quite funny actually," end quote. And that's when the wedding story enters, the picture. In 2004, Peter and Chrissy Manley got married at the Flamingo in Las Vegas with Phil Taylor on the invite list, although Taylor never showed up. Manley's account on the Talkball podcast on TalkSport in 2024 went like this, quote, "He was invited. I think he thought it was a paid bar. He never has anything in his pocket other than chalk," end quote. The third world final between them on January 1st, 2006 played out as another 7-0 demolition, with Taylor averaging 106.74 for the match and checking out 54% of his doubles, calling it the realization of his dream to win 13 world titles. By March 15th, 2025, in a Talkball interview quoted by Darts News, Manley reflected on the long rivalry with these words, quote, "It must have bothered him because he has said to me, 'Oh, we haven't got a problem now, have we?' I thought, well, we didn't back then. It was just a wind-up to try and beat you. Everyone gave Phil Taylor respect, and don't get me wrong, he's the GOAT, so he should have had respect. But I just wasn't that player to give it to him. I wanted to beat him. I wanted to go home and have some posh food on my table." End quote. Taylor himself, looking back in a Sky Sports archive segment replayed in 2018, was generous in his assessment, quote, "I really got the grit in my teeth when I played Peter Manley. He did wind you up. He was the master at it. I'm not bad myself, but he's better than me. I miss him not being here," end quote. 3 world finals, 3 whitewash style losses, 1 refused handshake and 1 unattended wedding, alongside 2 decades of mutual respect, gamesmanship and grudging admiration. The rivalry with Phil Taylor served as the engine of Peter Manley's entire career, the reason he became a villain, the reason he kept coming back, and ultimately, the reason a generation of darts fans still remembers the man they called One Dart. Those are the 7 players who defined the heated side of Peter Manley's career, running from Roland Scholten and Dennis Smith on the lighter end, through to a former best man who put the word cheat in print, the 2025 rebellion against his PDPA chairmanship, the 20-year-old he ran off the stage at the Circus Tavern, and right up to the rivalry with Phil Taylor that put him in 3 world finals and gave darts one of its most replayed handshake moments. Manley himself has always framed most of it as a wind-up, a calculated attempt to break opponents and convert boos into wins. The players on this list never quite saw it that way. Looking at the record, with 3 lost world finals, fines for on-stage conduct, a public falling out with his best man, and the 2025 backlash from the very players he was elected to represent, it seems fair to conclude that the feelings, whether Peter Manley hated them or they hated him, were genuine on both sides of the oche.